we are all present in the room, with Helen joining us online. In the case of an emergency, we can go out the door in either direction, and either down the stairs or wait at the top of the stairs in the area of refuge to be rescued. Any agenda changes? Okay, we will keep it as is. Open to the public for items not on the agenda. Hearing none, we will keep it as is. Does anyone have any announcements?
I think we've already put this one in your packet, but the council made a huge decision last week, which was to award a construction contract for the bike ped bridge over the interstate, which has been on our to-do list as a community for a very long time. This is a big project, and there's been a lot of important steps, but awarding the construction contract is probably the most important of all the important steps. So work is, as I'm described how this work is going to be, is that it's going to look like not a lot is happening, because a lot of the big pieces are being built off-site and ordered, and a lot of stuff is going to be along the right of way. And then when it actually goes to happen, they've got a defined number of total nights during which they'll be sort of installing the stuff that crosses the interstate, and it'll be one side and the other side. The contractor is ECI, and they do lots of projects, but quite recently they built the new bridge that is in Richmond over the interstate, sort of right by Cochrane's. So they are experienced in building things over highways in our community, or in our area.
And based in our community too, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, they've got a
or have a place, you know, that's their headquarters, but very good. They have started some amount of work. The trees got cut before the bat window closed, so.
Do you know what time they're shooting for an anticipated opening date for it?
I think we're saying fall of 28 for opening. I don't know I don't know the details of the contract, but typically within something like this, the there's a completion date, and then they have to figure out with their own suppliers. I've told that, big lead time on steel. So that's probably going to be one of the timeline drivers in it, but.
And sorry if you already said this, but the my understanding from Paul is that it's going to be that kind of construction where it looks like nothing, all the pieces. So if you're a year from now and you're going, what's happening? It's still likely on track, just coming in big modular pieces.
Floating the bridge down at, what is it? Not Diamond Point, but Ticonderoga.
Oh,
Yeah, Crown
There was
Point.
nothing there, and suddenly there's a bridge.
Yeah, Crown Point.
Okay, so first big item on the agenda is the transferable development rights discussion. We have a memo specific to this in the packet, and we were introduced to this idea a few months back. Maybe more than a few months, but.
Yeah, the commission has seen it a few times. We did a couple years ago at this point, expand the TDR program from what it was before, which was more internal, to what was called the Southeast Quadrant, is sort of sending and receiving in the same area, to expanding those receiving areas out to the Shelburne Road, the Williston Road, these other areas we're looking for higher density housing development. And then in last August, alongside the last round of LDR amendment adoption, we were asked to have the commission was asked to consider again more application of TDRs, more places that it could be required, or more ways it could be required, and or places that it could be received in a way that makes that market move more than it has in recent years. That's the very short version.
Yep. So the rest is really in your memo. I'm happy to answer any questions in there, but this is really your conversation to have about what you'd like to do.
Well, I like the next possible steps, because it's more or less, I thought that, yes, we should, keep to the 2,000 square feet, because it's what we figured was equivalent of a regular dwelling, and there's no reason to abolish, to abandon that. I thought for each 2,000 feet, the 2,000 square feet for any development of 7 stories or more would require TDRs.
So that is true. It is 5 stories or more than 5 stories in other places.
Well, that was
No,
my
I'm
next
just saying
question.
that that's Michael's proposal.
Oh, to keep it that way?
No,
No,
to make it that way.
in city center. Oh, I was not
And
understanding.
then,
Okay.
are there any other zones where more than 6 stories are allowed besides city center, besides this?
Yes, so the high scale mixed use zone that is primarily along Shelburne Road corridor allows up to 7 stories if you use TDRs and or inclusionary housing bonuses. So the base is 5, and you can get 2 more by using one or the other or both of TDRs and inclusionary to get to 7.
So we can't add another layer on that. That they could get more than 7 with
That's
TDRs,
that's up to you all.
because, yeah,
What, refresh my memory, currently in city center, we allow in T5, how high we go? 14?
14,
In T4, we're
12.
12.
But then you also get that affordable housing bonus still probably kicked in anyways, because if it's over 25 units, it'll de facto be higher.
If it's housing.
If it's housing.
Okay,
If it's a hotel or commercial, I don't see someone building a 14-story office building these days, but if it was not housing, you wouldn't get that bonus, but yes, with housing.
but you still could build up to a 14-story commercial building right now. Okay.
Yes.
And my concern is if we suddenly tack TDRs onto that, that doesn't feel right to me to put TDRs onto something that's already policy.
And also probably not much of a limiting factor.
Yeah, that seems like bad policy to me,
Helen has raised her hand, just flagging that.
Okay, I think Colin might have happened first, so we'll do Colin and then Helen.
Yeah, just reading from the memo, I'm personally very amenable to exploring the idea of essentially option 2 of not getting rid of the current TDR structures, but to supplement it to essentially get more market value of them, of using things that we don't want, but we can't quite outright ban. Like the parking one seems very interesting to me. I think there's definitely be a lot of nuance where we set those limits, but that would, it allows to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, reduce the amount of like excessive parking we have, and also reduce the amount of development in areas that are further away. Like I think there's a tension at the moment, we're trying to add more density. And if we try to make it if we make adding more density too contingent on buying TDRs, we are effectively disincentivizing adding more density, which as the memo notes is not what we want to be doing. And I like the idea of everyone should parking. The additional point of requiring TDRs to build less than a certain number of stories in certain commercial industrial districts. I'm intrigued by that option, though that said, we have to be very careful how we implement. We don't want to ban warehouses effectively, or at least not citywide certainly, but I am, put it this way, that whole trying to tie them more to things that we kind of tying them more to using land. Basically, if you want to use land inefficiently, you have to buy a TDR. I like that idea.
Inefficient.
Yeah, that's what it's essentially proposing. If you want to do a mass surface walk, you need to buy a TDR to do that, and I like that idea.
yeah, the parking.
Helen, do you wanna go?
Yeah, I guess my question is, who is clamoring to incentivize developers to buy more TDRs? Is it the people who own them? I mean, we have no one's taken us up on, as far as I know, building 10 stories anywhere. I just, I'm not opposed to looking at it and seeing if you can incentivize certain things. I'm just curious about, what's pushing this to make us feel like we need to do it now.
Okay.
I've heard that the council, or maybe the city in general, is concerned about the fact that people are holding have land which has been conserved, but on the assumption that they will, that somebody will buy the TDRs from them. And there's an illegal obligation eventually that the city, that they need somebody to buy them. And so there's a concern that that obligation could lead to some legal problems. That's what I've been told. And that's one of the reasons that did the council ask us to do this?
Yes, so that's all I was going to say is that in the city council's discussion in the adopting the last round of LDR amendments last August, September, they requested that the planning commission re-examine the TDR program and see if it could be tweaked, if it could be expanded, if it could be changed in ways, in any way that would move more TDRs. Exactly what the motivation is for wanting more movement in the TDR market. I think there's a lot of varied reasons and there's pros and cons to all of the things that we're talking about. So I will say from at least my perspective, but I think staff perspective, there's not a clear, you must do this right now mandate, but it's something that the city council asked you all to look at again.
Yeah, the other thing about this, it's gonna be many, many years before we see any kind of high-rise buildings here, but at least if it's on the books, somebody who holds TDRs can't really complain that the market is too narrow.
Just for additional context, because Duncan raised the question, the statement that I'm about to make is I'm not passing a judgment on one way or the other. But in making the motion to request the planning commission look at this, Councillor Chalnick also added that he said he was aware that council was adopting the taller heights. And was hopeful that in stating in the same motion that the council is requesting the commission look at TDRs for heights below that carries some weight in the development community, acknowledging that that they were aware that they were adopting it first, but making the request at the same time. So from a timing perspective, I think that's a little bit of why the council wanted to have you look at the subject now, because in at least one councillor's mind, the timeliness of considering putting a TDR layer relative to the adoption timeline was important. And I'm not gonna make a judgment past that about whether that's a political importance or legal importance or moral importance or economic importance, just that tying those two together was at least Councillor Chalmers.
So essentially the concern is that if we were to raise the heights, then several years later, that's like, oh, but you need TDRs to do that, that would be undesirable. Is that what they're getting at? Or
That perhaps that would be making that doing so would be more difficult, whether legally or otherwise.
okay,
If you were to do it, say, 10 years from now.
sure.
Is that in here? Did I somehow miss it? Like the idea that we've already allowed up to a certain number of stories and now we want to go back and in order to get that number of stories, you have to use a TDR. Like, is that, am I just
The
misunderstanding?
statement that I just made.
It's not specifically addressed.
Like
Wait, sorry, what's the,
Yeah.
sorry, what I just said?
So it sounds like that counselor was maybe indicating that in order to get the number of stories, we might want to require people to use TDRs to get that number of stories instead of just as per right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about the only reason you might want to do it. Or one reason. Otherwise, if you raise the limit, and you can do it if you want, no one has come forward, and I think I've been convinced that it's so much more expensive that it might be a while before someone, jumps at putting a skyscraper, well, not a skyscraper, but, a really tall building, anywhere in the community. But you wouldn't, so the TDRs, I don't know what they would do to help it, but.
It is in next steps number 1, actually, I guess, now that we're saying this, because it says the commission could consider requiring TDRs be used for any development above 5 or 6 stories in T4, and we have upped the max to 12 there, or above 8 to 9 stories in T5, and we've upped the max to 14. So that's where.
Right,
it
and
is.
and
Oh,
any
I
of
thought
those
you were asking,
numbers.
I thought you were asking if the timing question was in that. The
No,
timing question
the
is not.
timing question isn't. I'm just.
Oh, okay.
It's true, like if we have already allowed people to go up to those number of stories, but if we're not currently requiring the TDRs and we want to require the TDRs, then we should do it soon. That's the-
Sooner
That was
rather
the
than later.
Suggestion from council as to the
Okay.
timeliness of the
Yeah.
conversation.
Okay.
Helen, did that answer your question or did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no, I mean, that helps. What, I have one more question, and that is, what are they selling for now? What does the TDR cost now?
It's a good question, Helen. We don't set a market price for them, first of all, so the market is whatever somebody is willing to pay for them.
Negotiation.
There have not been a lot sold in recent years and we're not necessarily privy to the conversation.
Mm.
The numbers that I have heard are in the, somewhere between 8 and 14,000 per. And I think, a piece of that is if you're selling one or a handful of them, legal costs are a chunk of that already, realistically, just to sort of, it requires density reduction easements and, both sides want to make sure they're protected. So some amount of that pretty quickly goes to just the legal cost of it.
And a surveyor has to pin the area.
Right.
And that was always the case, right?
That's always been the case, yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so we're not really changing those rules.
Yeah, and a developer and the holder of TDRs they would negotiate the price. He's not gonna buy them I don't think we've sold any that are in the $14,000 range in recent years. I don't know that, but
Yeah.
I've been trying to pretend I'm a developer, which is not the easiest thing to do, but
it's hard.
it is. But, trying to think, it's like, well, where would I want to build something taller? And, I kind of thought of two different instances. One, from our last meeting, we were talking about medical sites out on Tilly Drive. That there seems to be still a demand for more medical space. And I don't know if those buildings were designed to handle more stories, but I could think that, you could quite possibly, allow a bonus of building additional area without having to add parking. Or, because they have quite high parking standards where they are right now. Some of it gets used all the time and some of it doesn't. So, figure out a way that you can increase the density on existing commercial where otherwise parking would be a limitation. And that could possibly work with residential too, but I don't think it works easily with residential.
Good news, sort of, in that district, you already do allow for 2 additional stories through the use of TDRs.
Okay,
the
so it's
the
already
height
there.
cap is 50 feet, and then when you did your update 2 years ago, you took the commercial industrial areas and you allowed for up to 2 stories or 28 feet
With
through
TDRs.
TDRs.
So we've already got
Or
that.
on the side. Or
Yeah.
additional bulk.
Yep, more bulk,
Yeah, 'cause it
and
needs
lot
to be on
coverage, all of
top. It
those
can
things,
be.
yeah.
Can be, but it doesn't have to be. The other place, and I mean, we've seen a few like less than stellar proposals for the Farrell property. Where they're cramming a lot of little 3-story buildings on this site, and I'm like, no, no, that's much too valuable a site to do that. You know, where, you know, there seems to be a real demand in South Burlington for fairly high, fairly, what's the word? Wealthy, wealthy, housing for people moving here who are seniors. You know, it's like an extraordinary number of wealthy seniors that I've met who have moved here. And I keep thinking that something like the Farrell property could really, that site and a few others around the city that maybe are close to the lake, but also close to major intersections, could really handle a fairly tall building. You know, it would have to be an expensive building, because the parking would have to be under it, or parking would have to be
And need
inside
help.
it somehow. And, you know, these would be tall, beautiful buildings that, you know, nobody's gonna say, oh, that's horrible, we don't want that there. You know, like that happened to the GE property, in Burlington, where people said, oh, I'm gonna lose my views. Yeah, a slender, beautiful, you know, a lot of glass probably, building. that-
You're right, I mean,
that-
wealthy seniors.
It would be,
love to live in
it would be a
good
place.
apartment.
And that land, I don't see any other way to adequately utilize the value of that site. With, you know, because so much of it you can't build on because it's wetland or some other, you know.
That's what.
There's only a bit of it that can really be built on. And if anybody is gonna be willing to pay some money to go taller, it would be Farrell, wouldn't they?
Well, they came in front of the DRB not that long ago.
I know.
And they had to do the wetlands delineation and then the
Right.
whole thing fell apart.
Well, yeah.
Because when we walked the site as a group, we had a public meeting where we walked it,
Right, cause
and
they
it
were,
was all marshy. The
Yeah.
entire lot they were gonna build on, and I guess when they did the delineation, there was nothing to build on. So I'm not sure
Well, they had
any
that
of that
one-
property is developed.
not even that one piece of it where they put all those stubby little buildings on it.
No, that was the original proposal, which got canned because it was on a wetland.
Yeah, because there's a wooded area where the old hotel and everything used to be. And then there was kind of an open area,
Right.
and there's like one private road and a number of
Right.
houses, because we heard from almost all those residents that were there. And it's mostly an open field that they wanted to build on, and that
That's probably.
they
what-
didn't get enough in the delineation. and
So a
moved
tall
forward.
building on the limited amount of
Yeah.
site that's buildable there is the only way you could build.
If there's enough of it. Listen, we didn't see it, but
So-
it may be blocked out, but
Probably wanna get back onto less specific
Yeah.
property.
But so that was an example, you know, it's like, cause I kind of work more easily with examples. But other places potentially that are, you know, a pretty major intersection. You know, like. Well, I could have seen a taller building. I mean, they already put a fairly tall building at the head of Dorset Street. But that kind of a site.
There are also redevelopment sites.
That kind of a site, but it just struck me that the kind of, you know, the kind of housing that is worth a lot of money. It would allow somebody to wanna have to pay. You know, pay for the TDRs, cause otherwise I don't really see much of a demand for them.
Colin's had his hand up for a long time.
Or-
We let Colin talk.
One clarification, do we currently, you're mentioning about like required parking, do we still have parking minimums in any areas of the city at the moment?
The only parking minimums that exist are multifamily housing needs to have 1 per unit, I believe. Or 3/4 of a space per
I think
unit.
it's 3/4.
Otherwise, we have eliminated all minimums in the city.
Gotcha. And yeah, so 3/4 per unit for multifamily.
think so.
Yeah, so pretty low.
Right.
If you wanted to use TDRs for,
I mean, yeah, that's why, again, like, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I understand there might not be an appetite to, like, we don't have a firm parking maximum, but like, have a level that we think is practical. We prefer that maximum. If you wanna go up that maximum, use a TDR.
Yeah.
Like, I like that idea a lot.
Right, so there's a few different, if you wanted to go down that path, there's a few different ways that you could look at it. You could look at it as say, you know, if the parking is greater than in area is greater than, you know, X relationship to the building in which it's serving, then it needs to, you know, either buy TDRs or go upwards, for example.
Yeah.
So just to be totally clear, it's 0.75 spaces per dwelling unit that are studios and 1 bedrooms. 1 space per dwelling unit if it's 2 or more bedrooms.
As a citywide minimum.
Yes, except I believe that city center has
City-
the form-based code has no
City
minimum.
Center has its own.
Yeah.
So it's citywide outside of city center,
Gotcha.
residential only.
So if I could reword what I was saying, instead of taking an exceptional site. So that, you know, just, I think if a proposal came in and there was an exceptional project that somehow needed additional height or additional something that a TDR could possibly be used for. I don't know, but I don't know that you can define it really specifically because it's going to be very site specific.
You can't zone for a specific property as well.
Well, I know, but you know, but you can say an exceptional situation.
It's really sticky.
Hard to say that.
John's, go ahead, John.
Just,
That's why it's so hard to get good.
I don't really have a problem giving the time frame and that we just made the changes. Going back and saying, okay, well, we're gonna lower the allowable heights by 2, 3, 4 stories and say TDRs for the rest of them. Because at this point, I don't think anybody's taken us up on it. My concern with that is that I don't know that anybody's gonna take us up on that.
Right.
So we can require it, but I think it's gonna be quite some time before anybody wants to use them. So I think if we're gonna do it, we should do it now. I don't feel bad doing that. Cause I don't think it's impacting anybody who's thinking about building a 10+ story building at the moment.
I think that's.
could be
accurate.
wrong,
I
but-
think that's probably, we've not heard at this time that's.
Yeah. So,
I
That's
would
why we
agree.
sort of put one of those breakpoints in at that story level was.
but I do agree with Con. I think if we wanna try and enhance the market, but still push toward our goal of densification, we may have more luck saying, okay, well, if you wanna build a 2-story building, where we want you to build a 3 or 4-story building, then you're gonna have to buy TDRs to get there. It may be a way to allow, cause I think there are a lot of developers that don't have as much financial wherewithal to do these big projects as we might like, and they tend to go towards more compact projects. I know like, one of the developers was gonna, work down by where the old movie theater was. I forget who it was, but there was a plan to build a number of buildings over there, and I don't know where it stands, but they did a whole PUD, and I haven't seen construction yet, but, and it was all very much based on, well, we have to do one building so we can get some cash flow going here, so we can get the loan to do the next building, and we don't know when we're gonna do it, or if we'll get it done in 10 years because we don't have the financing. So maybe one of the ways to try and encourage the developers to do a little more density would be to say, hey, you need to do these minimums. If you can't, then maybe we'll let you, you know, buy some TDRs along with things like parking or maybe some other bulk variances that we can live with if they wanna go a little less, make them pay to get that deviation on the smaller side.
I think the key point that you just raised is that you're comfortable with the outcome if they choose to do or not do, right? So you wouldn't want, for example, Market Street to be bought down to 1-story buildings,
No.
right?
There would have to be
I'm giving an extreme example, but
Yes.
that would not be an outcome that would be the long-term, either good quality or frankly, the tax returns on the middle of city center. Now, somewhere else where you currently only require 1 story, but you've been perhaps aspiring for more, that's something to look at.
But wouldn't we have to then establish the minimum number of stories so that, and the same would apply to parking, you'd have to have maximums and for somebody to buy TDRs to build more.
Right, you have to create, there has to be a constraint in place
Yeah.
beyond which,
In both,
right,
so,
So there are minimum stories in city center.
right, but not elsewhere for the most.
No, but
part.
I'm saying there is that part of what Michael's saying, the structure of you have to build 3 stories in T5 that exists.
Like, for example, you could have something like, or you have something like higher scale mixed use, you need TDR to build 1 story and high scale mixed use, for example.
we wouldn't want them to, well, they can't build less. They're required
In city center.
in city center, but we don't want to let them buy TDRs to build less. Not in city center anyway,
No, maybe like other areas though.
outside.
I'm not making a specific proposal.
Sure, sure.
What I'm suggesting is there may be some areas where if we're looking to create a market.
Yep.
Again, like I'm saying, think what the developers may want. If we have minimums and we say, some developer comes in and comes to mind the Chase Bank building that they're building at Swift and Dorset. They desperately wanted that to be a 1-story building, and the code says 2.
Shelburne Road, you mean?
Shelburne Road in Swift, yes. And we went around and around and around and around because Chase was very specific about what they wanted, and we finally got them to build something that looks kind of like a 2-story building. Not really, but kinda. And
Whole
you-
story.
It's, yeah, but they were really resistant to do that. If we had something in place where we could just say, okay, buy TDR and we'll let that slide, then that might have been one of those things where they probably would have jumped on that.
So just as another quick clarification, there are parking maximums in city center. It's 2 in T5, it's 2 spaces maximum per residential unit.
Though, again, though, doesn't it get weird stuff though, they're all mixed use, that
Right.
it de facto
In-
barely
in-
ever applies.
In practice, it's
Yeah.
very,
What about commercial?
No,
It's just by residential unit. There's no maximum for commercial.
Yeah.
Kind of got mixed feelings about that, because really we don't want more impervious surface.
well, and that's where one of the ideas that we thought you could explore, let's say in city center, I'm not saying this is an easy project, but you could. If there was more than a certain amount of new surface parking, then they would either need to choose to go structured up or pay TDRs in city center, for example. Or elsewhere in the commercial industrial park, so it's not necessarily creating a maximum because they could build structured or they could. Use TDRs as a couple of different ways to do it, but.
How much more they need structured would be a lot better than. Well,
I was just thinking, at our last meeting, we had a developer, Jeff Nick, sitting here asking us for something. It was MSN, I think is what it was. And I'm just thinking, okay, so there's a demand there. How do we, granted, we don't want to give a developer something they shouldn't be able to do anyway, but is there a way to?
Patch Duncan, and we've spent some time exploring different ways around it.
Yeah,
The state law is very precise in that it can only be used to increase building bulk or height or density or
that's
coverage.
a state.
It can't be anything outside of that. So we couldn't say, if you paint your building purple instead of blue, or you meet a higher energy standard, or you add this use, those are not eligible, unfortunately. So it's can only be physical.
So parking would be going under the coverage standard, essentially.
Yeah.
If you thought of it not
Yeah.
as number of parking spaces, but
Lot
land
coverage.
dedicated to parking.
Sure, I mean,
Right,
honestly,
and that
I like
might-
that better anyways, frankly.
Right, that's a little bit of a distinction that we have
Yeah.
to be careful about. It's not, if you choose to be inefficient in your parking layout or very efficient.
Yeah,
It's about the amount of land dedicated.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we care about the most.
didn't Shearer Audi or whatever it is, didn't they have to buy a?
Right, so they wanted a little bit more lot coverage,
So
and that
they-
is something you have enabled along the Shelburne Road corridor. You can buy up to, I think, 10% more lot coverage from 70 up to 80% through the purchase of TDRs.
Yep.
And they did buy it.
Yep.
I don't know how many.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that example seemed like it's worked reasonably then, like it said something that might makes sense in other areas and not just that one spot.
The thing that's a little bit interesting in my mind about that is that you're allowing someone to pay for something that the city does not want in a policy way, as opposed to things we were saying that we could have someone pay. You could sort of flip it around, it was part of the memo, cause you're still on the ground, the effect is more pavement, more surface parking, like it's still something that we don't wanna see. And where's the line between, you know, the cost of a TDR and the conservation value of the TDR, conserving 0.83 acres somewhere else versus that a certain amount of surface parking. So it's that kind of trade-off about something that you do want or don't want, where like something like the height, if you wanted to say, okay, it's 14, you know, 14's the maximum with everything combined, you get 11 and you can buy the last 3, we're asking someone to pay for something that we like anyway.
And that we're okay with the outcome either way.
We're okay, or we would be okay if
We'd
someone
be
built
as-
11 or 14.
I think one of the fundamental challenges you have here is that you spent a lot of time right-sizing our regulations. So there are not a huge amount of places where you say, what we really want is this completely different thing, because you've been so dedicated and being really thoughtful about what you want.
And trying to be transparent, trying to have the regulations say, this is the maximum thing that we want, or the minimum thing that we want. And so everybody reading it can see, oh, this is clearly this, as opposed to, oh, just kidding, here's an asterisk that someone can do something else.
I mean, per Michael's statement, is the city on the hook for these TDRs if they do not sell? Is that an actual fact?
We can't say we can't say legally, politically. There's other considerations. Nobody has to sell the TDR.
Mhm.
So it's not like you suddenly had to conserve all your land and it's permanently conserved and then we're suddenly paying you for it, not holding up our end of the bargain. It gets it's squishy in there somewhere. Especially because as Paul said, we never said a market price, even when the program was established, it never said, and a TDR is worth $10,000. So hypothetically, someone who owns 100 of them and just wants to get rid of them and find someone who wants to buy them could say like, yeah, okay, at scale, I'll sell them for 5,000 each.
The reason I'm asking is we're trying to manipulate the market here.
Yes,
We're trying to take something that there's really not much demand for and somehow create a demand.
yes.
And it's very difficult. And again, I'm not a fan of us tacking it back onto something that previously allowed. I think that's changing the game and changing the rules in the middle of the game. But
The thing to-
Colin said
Yeah.
his hand up.
No, I guess just to rear though, we do, I mean, the reason we want them to sell beyond the landowners being annoying about it is it is designed to limit sprawl. Like we are trying to reduce conservation, obvious point, but just wanted to. Yeah, say it happen, it makes for sense. Make sure we keep that in mind in all these discussions that the more of them sell, the more of the city gets conserved, which is good.
I would just clarify, gets permanently
Sorry,
conserved.
currently.
As opposed to, it's all areas that are currently regulatorily conserved.
Mhm.
These are all areas that are in the Natural Resource Protection District. So you can't build on them now. It's just the conserving against the, 50 years from now, all the policies get reversed.
Mhm. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, so it's just.
and it's up to the personal landowner to make the decision if they want to do that.
Right,
Yeah.
so, and that's not something that we can
We
ever
can't
control.
control.
No, I know, but it's not.
There
it's
may
not
be
like-
people that it's at no price would they permanently conserve their land because they're thinking of their great grandkids and what happens if all the rules change, et cetera, we'd have no idea. There's,
Right, and on the flip side, there are folks who would have chosen, we mentioned Sarah Dopp earlier this evening, to permanently conserve their land regardless of the subject of TDRs.
Right.
Those are philosophical choices that individuals can make and
So
whole
When-
gamut
when we-
exists.
when we talk about the political part, because I assume that was part of the thinking by the council, when the program was started, was there really a guarantee to someone that if they had a, you know, I don't know, a 20-acre parcel that they bought and built a house on and they loved being, quote, in the country, that, or that they only bought it because at some point they could get paid for conserving that property and perpetuating their love of being in the country?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, was
yes,
was
the
that the
bargain
deal?
was-
People
But
were,
the question was there a guarantee made?
No,
I am
no.
not
Yeah.
aware of
I don't
any
think so.
statement made to say you are promised anything as a result of this, just to be clear on that. No, there may have been a lot of conversation around the subject, but I'm not aware of anybody who said we are making a unequivocal guarantee and promise that you will be able to sell
I
these.
think
That's
one
it.
of your predecessors made that promise, but off, you know, not legally. We've got to remember that the bargain is, if you give up your development rights, you can sell TDRs to recover something. And the land remains yours, but it's conserved in forever.
but I guess my point is that were people really buying land with that in mind? Or is this just something that developed over time as the city was trying to find ways to, you know, keep open parts of the southeast quadrant, and more intensely build other parts?
Yes, it was to prevent sprawl.
Yeah, okay, but if there was no guarantee, I'm just saying, you know, the deal was, or the fear is that we'll get taken to court because someone believes that because they've owned their 20 acres or 40 acres or whatever the heck it is, for 50 years, and now they want to cash in on the, you know, keeping it, perpetually undeveloped, that we need to pay them for that?
Not we.
Or
No, I
developers
think
when there
Ellen's-
isn't a
Oh, you mean
market?
legally? No.
I mean, Helen's not asking,
Yeah.
you know, Michael to answer the question. I think she's asking, like, it's a
It's a
philosophical
rhetorical
question of,
question, I
is this
guess,
a
yeah.
thing that we need to feel compelled to do something about
Correct.
or not? And I think that that is fundamentally a question, like, probably before we say, oh yeah, we're just gonna apply it to coverage, you know? I mean, it is a question, and I think that Ellen is really like kind of putting that out there, like,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Something.
I don't
Or
know.
pass a new regulation says there's a sunset date on it.
So,
I-
and sorry to,
Yeah.
Colin?
I guess, though, I mean, I guess to keep in mind, the big thing that's changed is that, let's be real, the market value of them has effectively been slashed by what we've done the last year or so of upzoning, basically. Like, I mean, we can't put numbers to that, but you would expect, based on the fact that we've essentially given everyone TDRs for free, effectively by giving everyone more vote by density, that we have considerably reduced the value of them. So I guess I almost see as adding more things into what you use TDRs for is more trying to bring it back to the status quo rather than trying to expand the program. It's more just trying to negate the impacts upzoning has had on the program, is I guess as I see it, and why this seems urgent to me, I guess.
Paul?
I do want to just clarify that City Center has not been a receiving area for TDRs in the past at any point. So
Mhm.
until 3 or 4 years ago, it was all self-contained within the southeast quadrant only. You took it to Shelburne Road, to the industrial areas. 2
But
or
this-
3 years ago, because of the whole Act 181 and the automatic fourplex can be on the same property, which that negated any function of it in that part of the city.
In the southeast quadrant.
Yes, though we also dropped the lot size too, which is another
Yep.
upzone, which I agree with, but
Yep,
a
understood.
further erosion of essentially market value of them.
So I guess to try to bring it back to like our questions, you know, I think that in the, you know, Michael kind of tried to focus us on these possible next steps first. You know, there is like this idea that, you know, we could use the TDRs for that upzoning that happened in City Center as an option. Or there's these other ideas like coverage and things, so. I mean, I guess it's not clear from all the discussion we've had if like any of those things are things we wanna try to move forward or not. Kind of really varied discussion.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, this is a really complicated topic.
If I can just add, if I understand correctly, one of the concerns is not so much people suing the city so much as going to court and contesting the natural resource conservation area designations. And saying you have stripped the value off my property and these TDRs are worthless and it was an illegal taking. And making that argument that that district shouldn't hold sway. Obviously, if that happens, then that would be
It also
problematic.
happened 21 years ago.
So.
It also happened 21 years ago or more.
So 2006.
The TDRs, NRP,
2006.
yeah, 20 years ago.
What exactly was?
I was like, that's not more than 10.
Sorry.
That's math.
Yeah. Sorry,
I mean, I guess if it's also not just clear what the next steps are, I mean, maybe we need to think about it.
How did, it would help for me to understand, like, how they got the TDRs. You know, was somebody just designated them, here, you got
Can
these?
you elaborate a little on the question?
It's some type of legal move that created these TDRs.
How did the
and
program exist?
gave them to certain people.
Okay.
No, physically, how does it work?
So, prior to 2005, the Southeast Quadrant had an overall, you know, allowance for development, and there were these areas called restricted areas, which were not supposed to be built on, but the Development Review Board could give exceptions to, essentially. Overall, density was allowed to be 1.2 units an acre in the Southeast Quadrant. And through the function of a planned unit development, it could be up to 4 units an acre in any development area. And so you could shift things around that way. That was replaced after a natural resources study in 2006 with creating the Natural Resource Protection District and the neighborhood districts in the Southeast Quadrant. And in order to achieve that, it kept that 1.2 units an acre across the whole area as the sort of build out, for lack of a better word. And then said, rather than have it be, you know, potentially anywhere that 1.2 units an acre is happening, we're creating this natural resource protection district that represents our conservation goals. And we're creating these neighborhoods that can be 4 or 8 dwelling units per acre. And the way to balance this out from all the different properties was to say that everybody was still inherently given 1.2 units an acre, and if you wanted to build up to 4 or 8, you bought the rights from the land that's been designated as NRP. So you'd buy it from a property that has now become mostly NRP and sell it to somebody who wants to build more units. Or, as happened more frequently, it was self-contained. So like South Point did it on its own property. So the part near Spear Street is built at 4 units an acre, and the development potential from the eastern portion of the property was moved over.
So it's kind of an incentive to cluster housing in denser areas and leave 3/4 of it. Like,
Incentive / requirement, yes. Because we set out the areas that we said were not allowed to be built, but
So the
Yeah.
idea was, instead of just saying half the land is not usable, deal with it. You know,
Cool.
there was this idea that you could kind of
so what
move things around.
what is a TDR exactly? I mean, is it a legal document?
yeah, so technically it's called a density reduction easement gets placed on it. So the easement gets placed just like any other easement. The city is the holder of the easement, and the easement states that the property owner has full rights to continue to use the land, to farm the land, to recreate on the land, but the easement takes away the ability to build development on that land, and we become the easement holder of that. It's a version of a conservation easement. And then it happens at the scale of, 0.8 acres per TDR, and so sometimes it's big contiguous areas, sometimes it's a splotch that is a general piece.
But it's to be paid for sometime in the future.
It is paid for when the property owner sells it to somebody who wants to buy it.
So it's a future payment in lieu of non-development.
I mean,
Often the
Yeah,
timing is
kinda.
close together, like a property owner will know they have the ability to put the easement on their property. And then they don't actually put the easement on their property until they know they have a buyer for
Yeah.
so it's usually pretty close together in time.
So if you have,
Occasionally it happens where the conservation easement is attached to the property and then you just have a legal document that says I have
so
however
the
many
Vermont Land Trust
TDRs.
has done it
Yeah.
that second way because their mission is to conserve land, so they went through the process of placing the conservation easement on, and then they hold this,
Oh, so they own a bunch of TDRs.
they own a few hundred.
Oh, wow.
But I think what John was saying is that, and Kelsey, like, we have zoned the land so that they aren't allowed to build.
Right.
Regardless of whether or not there's a market for that actual exchange, so that's where I think this conversation comes in,
And I
like,
do wanna be just a little bit careful from a legal perspective. Properties of under 15 acres can still build a home on that property. More than 15 acres can build 3 homes. Vermont has a right to farm law, so agriculture is allowed, silviculture is allowed, so just to be
we've zoned a reduction.
And we changed the 3 homes to
restrictions.
3 duplex
three
structures.
duplexes, right? So that is all,
I mean, recent, not that recent, but South Village and Ciderville both bought a lot of TDRs.
Cider Mill bought a bunch, South Village was self-contained, so they used all
own
of their,
internal, like South Point.
correct.
And the Vermont Land Trust, VLT, they hold a lot of TDRs that they
They do, yeah.
paid for, and they would, I know they'd like to sell them.
They
I think
They hold a number of them through the purchase of the land that they then placed a conservation easement on.
some bread and butter, maybe partly.
Right, so in that arrangement, the Vermont Land Trust purchased the land and then placed an agricultural easement on it, sold the land back to bread and butter, but retained the TDRs.
Yeah.
And the purchase of the TDRs was part of their fee simple acquisition of the property.
Yeah.
Question from you?
In instances like where the land trust holds and has placed conservation easements on that land that had potential TDRs, do those conservation easements somehow conflict with the city's definition of how a TDR should be applied? In terms of like the easement that's created and then given to the city and?
No,
They are complementary to one another. So for example, on the Eau Claire property, there was funding that was acquired through the Natural Resource Conservation Service that places a much higher level of conservation, much beyond our easement. Our legal team reviewed it and found that to be equally, if not stronger, in the same intent as our density reduction easement. And so that was deemed to be an equivalent.
and
Does
also,
that answer your question? And it wasn't conserving, it was only conserving. TDRs can only come from the land that the city has designated as NRP. So if you conserve a developable parcel,
Right.
that's your prerogative to do that, but you don't gain TDRs from that.
But the normal process would be that the landowner wants to sell a TDR, designates an area that somebody wants to buy that TDR for, creates the easement, gives it to the city, and they're done. That's the process. If they put a conservation easement on it themselves, what's the responsibility of the city for that TDR at all then?
no. If they conserve,
They seem not connected.
yeah,
I mean, I guess responsibility has a lot of different meanings to the word. And I think there's a there's one category which is a legal responsibility that I can't answer on the fly, and then beyond that are responsibilities that may or may not be things that are considerations for you, I guess I feel like I'm being very oblique in my answer, but these are policy questions.
I mean, per what John said, it seems like, if I understand it correctly, when the city zoned the NRP, this was kind of a way to give some of those landowners, you know, they could still get some value out of their land. Is that not correct? No, it's they could.
I can't speak to the exact motivations, but I guess I could say in an alternative universe, the TDR program did not have to be created.
Yeah.
The city chose to create that at the same time as creating the NRP.
To give the landowners some financial recompense for the fact that their land was no longer developable.
They've given them an
And
incentive.
or to incentive, I mean, that's why I can't really speak to motivation, so
Yeah.
it may be that, it may be to have incentivized landowners to place, as Kelsey was saying, a higher level of conservation on it, because zoning is zoning can change.
Yeah.
It might have been an incentive-based program rather than a reward-based one, but
An incentive to conserve.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
I think to answer your question, they can sell that easement to somebody, but and then they can still own, they can own the land, but they can't hold the easement. It has to be held by somebody else.
Oh, so that's another wrinkle then, because the city wouldn't hold that easement.
The owner of the land can't hold the easement.
Right, so, but I'm just saying that if the city defined a certain process for defining a TDR and selling it, does the act of a property owner applying their own conservation easement and that easement's held by another party contradict the intent and therefore make the TDR null and void?
For that property.
That's just a question.
Assuming yes.
I may be wrong, just,
I think we don't know.
We know that there was a flaw in that the receiving and sending areas were both in the SEQ.
So.
Right.
So we have already, as we were talking about earlier, in some cases allowed those TDRs to be used outside of the southeast quadrant. So that is a thing that we've been doing in various limited circumstances. So I think the question here is, do we want to designate additional circumstances where those TDRs could be used?
Or areas.
Sort
Like
of the
city
same-
center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
city, so maybe it's height in city center, maybe it's coverage in the medium scale, or maybe, I don't know what the answer is, but I think the question is like, is this a thing that we want to kind of continue to
Talk
have a
about.
conversation about, and then, probably at a future meeting, like dive into like exactly what that might look like.
It almost seems like it's a reverse of what it should be. If you want somebody to build higher, taller building height in city center, it seems like they want to be paid to do that, not to pay for it. Because it's costing them more, it's like they want. It's like reverse of what it should be. You shouldn't have to pay for that. You should be paid to do that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Donna, on that one, certainly. I mean, one thing to think about is one way of looking at it, though, is that we don't necessarily have to decide this all at once. I mean, another way of sort of looking at it is that when we're kind of tweaking various, for example, we're already talking about tweaking about performance standards and like dimensional, kind of like make some tweaks to certain coverages in various districts, because I mean, not to say we have to do this specific thing, but like, I don't know, like we did a lot of updates to the residential and mixed use districts, but we haven't touched the commercial and industrial quite as much in the recent past. But it'd be something where if this is in the back of our mind, I could see this as being something where if we're ever a little on the fence over where exactly we want to sort of set this limit, we can sort of say, oh, well, we'll just sort of have low limit, high limit, you need to use TDRs or something. So I just think we can I can see us sort of integrating TDRs into various places as they come up as we're as seeing our things. But to reiterate, I still am very much more in favor of using them to limit stuff we don't want. That, at least that's my take on it, yeah.
Feeling like we don't have a consensus on like a thing we wanna move forward. I'm missing something.
It seems like.
When I was on the interim zoning PDR committee, one of the things I did is interviewed a few developers. And one that was of in particular interest, and that was the Fayette Drive corner. And I asked him if you could build another story by buying TDRs, would you do it? He said, oh God, absolutely yes. So building block is definite, well, there was a definite interest in it, but it wasn't available in that area at the time. We expanded the area.
And that is something you've now built into that area, the ability to buy 1 or 2 stories additional.
Yeah.
Through that.
Through the expansion of building bulk and allowing it there.
Oh, that, yes.
You know, cause I think the other thing that we have in the packet is a potential next step is some kind of bigger analysis to try to understand the markets and maybe understanding what we're missing or where there might be a potential to like change some thresholds. That is a larger study rather than kind of
Yeah.
an easy, yeah, we're gonna change this thing or add this thing.
What's your estimate about what that would you require 1 full-time employee for the next 3 years in order to do the analysis, or you know, give me an idea.
No, I mean, because we intentionally left it open in there to say, what would you want to be analyzing? I think that it is something that we can likely accommodate in the work plan. We may have to decide if something else gets a lower priority, but accommodate, you know, through a combination of staff and consulting time. I don't think we're talking about a human for 4 years studying this subject. That human would not have very much.
That human would have a.
So
Okay.
I mean, I think there's a lot of complexity that is easy to overlook, because if you start making something cost more to do something, developers always have the option to just not build at all. So there's always the like, where do you, if you push it too far, too high, too whatever, does it end up with having nothing built? Not just something that you like this outcome, this version or this version. It could be just, oh, I'm gonna hold this land forever. So I am not an economist. And I don't purport to be. So I think there's some complexity of the supply and demand that I think would take, I mean, we can list all the options. We cannot, at least I cannot provide like if you choose this option, this is what's gonna happen. If you choose this option, this is gonna,
Right.
it's like, if you choose this option, here's the 4 to 12 things that might happen.
Right, I
That's
think-
about what we can do.
Right, I think realistically, there are so many variables that come into the cost of development that, you know, just within the last 7 months, there's been probably many variables way beyond our control that I guess when I think of this, we probably can't control the variables sufficiently to give a ultimately very helpful answer. I think what a study could look at would be, what is a reasonable likelihood, let's say in city center, of the amount of development that could that would likely happen sort of big picture over the next 20 years based on, you know, historic trends, based on all our TIF projections and things like that. And what would it look like to allocate a portion of that to TDRs? I think beyond that, I think even an economist would be guessing, honestly. So
Well, I guess
So I don't know that you would, at the end of that, feel like you got a lot of value out of it. It's
And just
beyond.
I guess there's two things. One is like, one of the things that, you know, Colin said was like identifying areas where we would be okay with a range of outcomes. Like, we definitely want this, but we're okay going to this. And, you know, if you wanna go, you know, to one side of that range or the other, whether it's a minimum or maximum, then that would be like a opportunity for these, because we've thought about it, you know, and we're okay with that range. So I mean, it feels like there could be things like that, you know, maybe that would be what that analysis would try to identify. Where are those ranges, thresholds?
I think that those start to be outlined in that number 2, flipping the structure there of some ideas of what the universe of that might be.
And then I guess the other piece was like, you know, if we feel like that might be a way to go, like, you know, there's this next step 1, like, do we feel like we gave away too much too soon to just let everybody have in T4 and T5 12 and 14 stories, or do we feel like we want to be like, oh, let's maybe use TDRs at least temporarily while we make sure we didn't give away too much for free, like, because maybe that is one of those ranges where we are okay with them going up to the 5 to 6 stories or 8 to 9 stories. And we know we're okay, we've already said we're okay with going up to the 12 to 14, but maybe that's one of those thresholds where, as long as they're somewhere in that middle. I don't know, I guess I'm just saying, I mean, I know, Michael, that was where you started out, you know, saying, and it is in
Well,
there, and it seems like it came from the council.
rather than do nothing, maybe we should break this into 2 parts. And the first part might be to expand the area where TDRs can be used in the form-based, into this whole form-based code, or whatever city center zone. That would maybe, there might be developers who want to do more than they're allowed on lot coverage or building bulk, or I don't know, but that might yield something.
Getting closer to wetlands.
No.
Well, no, you wonder, you know, what do developers want to do? They'd like to be, you know, a little bit closer to a wetland probably. You know, it plays
It's on our work list already, isn't it?
I know.
That is,
Well,
that's a
I mean,
TDR threshold.
well,
I don't
that's
know.
more a definition of what is a wetland, you know,
Do-
because that's the question there. It's like, what
So I
is,
think
what
maybe
exactly
before
is a
we
wetland?
come up with a specific plan, we can open up to the audience for any comments before we close out discussion. Do you wanna go, Ryan?
Yeah, I will try not to make this sound more complicated, no guarantees. I think when I hear what you were just saying, Jessica, I think back to what Duncan was saying, where like we've allowed for a height, it feels to then say that we're suddenly going to backtrack and make you require the TDRs feels like really artificially going in that direction to create value with them. And so I share that concern a lot. I really like the conversation that started earlier with Colin and John about looking more into that number 2, where we say like, oh, to possibly buy down your density when we require more density. So to me, I think about, you know, what was the environment like when we were talking about when the discussion about creating TDRs happened, and American zoning was really infatuated with low density auto-centric development. And that was also the case here. And so, you know, I really like Michael's example of saying like, oh, this developer would have loved to put another story on. And we somehow have to create a mechanism to allow it instead of allowing it by default, right? So, you know, that's sort of like a weird space. We've come to this place in our country where we have this high reliance on automobiles. We have so much low density. And when you even start to look at our grand list and our lister cards and just how that really augments even like our tax flow and our expenditure on infrastructure per amount of tax revenue. Like that puts our city in a really bad place. And so I'm actually saying, not as a universal truth, but I think we're actually onto the other side of the coin where it might be better to more broadly increase the amount of minimums we have. Like either raise the minimum or add minimums in places that don't already exist, like higher minimum heights. As like, we want to go in that direction. We want high unit, high value properties with the small amount of property we have left to develop or redevelop.
Very tax efficient too.
Yeah, very tax efficient, and then say like, you know, that might not be everybody's cup of tea. They might really say, actually, that would make us put in an elevator where we really want a development product that doesn't have an elevator. And great, now you're incentivized to get the TDR to downsize that. Like I think of FedEx, like, and I know nobody wants a giant FedEx warehouse blocking Mount Mansfield, like I get that. But like, if you'd had a system where like it needed to actually be another story, they don't want that, right? They would have been like, great, we're going to buy down that story this many acres. That would very much create that, and that would have been, I would guess, a very minor cost compared to upzoning, but they want to be in the thick of it. They're certainly using our road network heavily, right? So I think there's trying to thread these different things and putting some historical lens, increasing minimums, and then allowing, if legally accepted, that where they can actually buy down, lowering that minimum. Did that not get more confusing?
No, I
No,
think,
it makes sense.
I think that is basically like exactly what Colin and John was kind of getting at. Like, how can we, yeah.
I mean, Tech Park is the example of what we want to encourage or incentivize. They're all what, 2 stories? The whole place? Maybe 3.
Too.
You know, and a lot of office buildings there, they should have been 5, 6, 7, 10 stories.
Well,
One
They-
to
they
3
are
is
what they
typically
need to
also
be.
there.
Yeah, I think they're within the limits.
One quick comment I just want to make, just what the numbers. So what I'm reading from the pack as well is that there are 800 of them in total available. Of course, a lot of them, and half of them have been performance severed, and we're talking somewhere around-ish $10,000 value. So the upper limit of kind of the sizes program, assuming a $10,000 valuation, about $8 million, but frankly, that would assume that would be the amount of money that would change hands if every single one of them sold, which seems unlikely. So I guess I'm more just trying to state that the sum total of this entire program, I'm on CCN, is like a few million. It's not peanuts, but it's also in the grand scheme of like citywide development amount of, in terms of the context of the amount of economic development happening in this city, it's a pretty small number. So I guess that's also me sort of saying, in terms of how we prioritize how much effort to put into sort of addressing this problem, it's not nothing, but like that's that's one apartment building worth of economic value that's on the hook at the absolute maximum. So not to mitigate plea, but like just keep that in mind. We're sitting like, how extensively we want to study this problem.
I mean, I think $10,000 to get 20,000 square feet extra is not.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
I don't think that's a big deal for a developer.
2,000, yeah.
At 2,000 per.
I'm
But if
not necessarily saying this is a good idea, but I know of places that have, I think I was reading about Waitsfield today that has an ordinance, or I don't know if it's in their LDRs, that in certain places, you're only allowed to build up to a 2,000 square foot house because they're trying to incentivize affordable housing.
Yep.
So, you know, not totally unreasonable that you could say, if you want to build over 3,000 square feet of house, single family house.
That's
a possibility.
Yeah, one of the
That
things in
you
number
can,
2.
buy a TDR, you know, to do that.
So units over a certain threshold of size.
Yeah, just, you know, to try to limit, you know, enormous houses being built. I mean, they'll still be able to build them in Shelburne, which apparently they are. If you do, if you go down Zorset
If you
Street,
went down that.
there's some very
They
enormous
wouldn't
houses.
necessarily limit them. I mean, they would place a drag on it, but it wouldn't be a prohibition.
Yeah, but it would create market.
But it would get a bit of money and
Right.
give some, yeah, if it's gonna happen anyways, at least we'll get some permanent easements.
Right,
The
yeah.
catch to those ones is.
maybe
that
they
it
can
would
even
then
feel
become
good
one at
about
a
that.
time, which is not an efficient way to do TDRs
Fair.
on either end, but it's a possibility.
Although some of the larger developments,
That's true.
you know, they're building a number of units. One thing, observation as we were going around throwing out ideas and you're like, well, you did that the last one, you did that, this is already in place. Just makes me wonder whether city council is aware of the changes, acutely aware of the different places where TDRs have been injected into the LDRs in the last couple of years. And whether it might be worth just kind of feeding that back to them and say, you know, we're talking about it, but just so you know, we did a lot of this before.
Within the statutes.
The stuff that's already in place, right? But like I said, you know, a lot of things came up and it was like, oh yeah, well, you already put that in there, you expanded it to this district, this is already. I just wonder if that's well understood.
Well, even
probably
before the TDRs existed, you know, my understanding was that when the Dorset Park was developed, that was an agreement that the developer came up with the idea of building, you know, having higher density, increasing it, doubling up the density. And that they would basically give the land for the Veterans Park to the city. And that was before the TDRs even existed, but that's exactly what it was.
Right.
All
All I'm saying is
in effect, it was doing the same thing without the mechanism.
yes, I'm just saying the reason this has come in front of us is because city council has there's an idea out there that the TDRs we need to increase the use of the TDRs.
Right.
To prop up the market. I'm just saying, I wonder if they're aware of the changes that have been made in the last couple of years that increase the use of the TDRs to try and prop that up.
And they may or may not be, but I do think there's been some things that have also limited the use of the TDRs, like that Act 181. Is the right number? Then, I guess what I'm hearing is, you know, a few minutes ago, I tried to focus us on the next steps, the 1 and 2, but it feels like we actually kind of want to look closer at the flipping the bonus structure, the number 2 from up above, like thinking about these spots where, what did you say? It was, if you want to use land inefficiently, then use a TDR, like kind of.
It's now a penalty.
Yeah,
for
but
using
it's
land
like-
inefficiently.
but I don't know that we need to have staff embark on this 20-year development analysis.
That's a.
That
Yeah,
feels,
I don't
that
think
feels
that's
like
a-
maybe overkill, maybe we could just.
I think we can tackle.
In a less intense process, like explore some of those flipping the bonus structure pieces.
As long as and we've already added in a few over the last few years, we sort of casually added here, we've added here and here. So I feel we can sort of continue that process of just trying to add a few more spots.
But I have to say, I like that idea of having a maximum square footage for a dwelling and saying, if you want to build higher than that, just pave it. And at that point, you're probably already in a $900 million house and another 10,000 is not going to make or break that.
Sure.
So I think that's a really good way to go about it, to encourage
So-
smaller, more affordable housing.
Yeah, so just to say it out loud, so what I'm saying is that, the bullets in this number 2 section, so it's that idea, if you wanna build a real big house, you gotta use some TDRs. The idea of like your bank example, they really didn't wanna put a second floor in their bank and they would have had to buy down. And then the other was the coverage piece, which we've only had like a tiny little area where somebody could do the coverage, so those are the 3 that are kind of outlined here that sounded pretty interesting to folks.
And I think you might have mentioned or one of you mentioned the idea of having, okay, well, we'll look at heights and say, okay, we want 4 stories. But we can live with 3, so 4 is fine, you wanna go down to 3, then
I mean,
just
especially
use a TDR. But you can't go to 1 in this district because we don't want 1.
yeah, I mean, the bank example you gave, I think everyone would serve better had they just paid someone $10,000 instead of building a fake second story, in my personal opinion, at least.
It would have saved us that much time on the TRP units.
What if
Even
people
with a
think,
balcony? Just a balcony will satisfy that requirement, doesn't it?
what if folks think about as a first step, expanding into this zone where we are, the use of TDRs as we've got them prescribed in the current chapter on TDRs, which only involves lot coverage, building bulk, which would include building footprint or building height. That might be a first step, and then we will have a little time to consider these other options.
So if you were to consider in city center, really height is the only one. Because there is no limit on lot coverage in city center.
All the way down, the whole area down Dorset and.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so you decided to.
So
and
building bulk is the only thing.
Building height is really the only thing, because building bulk, the only place bulk is regulated is in the T3 in order to have the transition from the historically single-family neighborhood. And you've got pretty narrow strips of that, so I would probably discourage having much larger bulk because you were very intentional in that area, so height, I think, is probably the tool in, or this combination of, this longer term review of surface parking and stuff like that, which is.
Well, maybe,
More
it sounds like we
complex,
need to
there's a
talk
lot
about
of
that
them.
more, so maybe it's the stuff in number 2, flipping the scenario and just continuing to just consider.
Yep.
Height and city center, we're not throwing that out as an idea, we'll keep that on the table. That sounds like. Pass.
Yeah, I guess one more comment I want to make on city center regard is, I think when we talk about sort of TDRs or good situation where there was a range of things we're okay with, I think city center, we have very kind of finely tuned regulations and there's already kind of less leeway there. So I sort of see the sort of acceptable range of what you could achieve with a TDR. I feel that because the regulations are already so, frankly, we put a lot of time and effort to them and they're already pretty dense to begin with. I think there is more wiggle room in other districts in terms of what the range of possibilities are with the current zoning district. So I personally think there's going to be less potential for them to be useful in city center compared to some other areas, is my gut feeling.
I would agree, because if we've already said you can go up to 14 stories.
Yeah,
I think trying to slap a TDR on that is bad policy.
and frankly, without that density, everyone's kind of gonna be jamming as much parking as they can in, simply put, and I think there's.
I'm okay looking at parking, but not.
Yeah, sure,
Not something we've already said this is okay, now we're gonna hit you with TDR.
Mhm.
I think you're gonna decrease the demand even more.
Sure.
Brian, you have something else?
Yeah, I just agree with that conversation, with the caveat that if you again increase the height, the minimum stories, you could then allow stories down to what we currently have using TDR. I do like number 2 generally the best out of the things that are offered. But I honestly wouldn't knock any of it. The only thing I would add that I don't see on those lists is that the way development historically happens is that it both goes out and up. And through this really weird suburban experiment and autocentric zoning we started doing in our country, and predominantly English speaking countries, we try to make neighborhoods unchangeable. And neighborhoods continue to transition even without the development changing in them. Like, I live in a low scale neighborhood, but so many of the housing units have transferred over to being rentals. So now instead of a family living in the house, 5 unrelated adults are living in the house. And that's one way things change as that kind of housing scarcity grows. But my neighborhood, the low scale neighborhood, also borders medium scale neighborhood, T4 and T5. So naturally, if you were to really look at it, the way things grow, naturally over time, some economic factor would change and there would be a natural growth of density in that neighborhood because of its immense proximity to lots of goods and services, a bus route, and just like the property pressure. So one of the things that I think is worth considering with the TDRs is that if you look at places that are within a quarter mile from another zone, that somebody could potentially use TDRs to bring their property into the requirements of the next zone. So rather than being like sort of the flat limit of like, in this area, you can go up 1 story or you can go down 1 story with a TDR. You'd actually be looking partially at that proximity. So my low scale neighborhood, which is directly adjacent to the TIF district, for example, a natural place to see increased density. Like I'm in the same zone as like somebody who lives way down Dorset Street, but that doesn't have the proximity bonus of natural development the way it happened before we locked zoning in so tight. So I think even though this might be more complicated and make too many gears turn in Paul's head right now, I think there's some value in allowing proximal change over time. So if I, try to look 20 years ahead, what that might look like is that somebody in my neighborhood might, on 1 individual lot or on 2 lots, then be able to buy TDRs to, instead of build to the low standard that is currently allowed, that they would be able to build then up to the medium. I keep forgetting the terminology, like that medium density that's allowed in the adjacent neighborhood. And then that could happen a few more times. And then in 15 years, the city might say, oh, this neighborhood is transitioning well. We could then broadly increase that to like medium, or even weird fluke might be like, actually, the T4, and I don't think that's realistic, but like, I think allowing a residential neighborhood to transition in that way, using that proximity, not a deep, long thing, not like a whole mile from it, but it's something that in that like kind of walkable range of a quarter mile starts to make that successional thing that used to happen naturally. It makes that kind of doppel in on its own without hard walls. I think of like forest succession, right? Like a large white pine falls down, it creates some open area. You start with goldenrod, and then that next layer of tree goes in before, it's several successions before you have oaks and white pines again, covering the canopy. And I'm just thinking creatively that the TDRs might be a tool to allow that softer blending of zone slowly over time than having those really sharp, hard divisions that we get locked into with that Euclidean zoning. Maybe too complicated for tonight, but planting that seed.
It's interesting, succession. But we are definitely gonna be revisiting this in some way at some point, but I think we need to get to our next item.
So just to make sure, no specific ask of staff at this time or tonight.
Not for tonight, but I think we do need to like come back to this, and it probably relates to our work plan, kind of where it.
Maybe some proposed excesses, maxes and minimums in these under item 2.
Yeah,
Bullet points.
the flipping the bonus structure. For the next time we talk about it, it'd be nice to like
Suggest
talk a
that.
little bit more.
So
about
why
the
don't we
bonus
start with
structure.
there? I'm gonna give the caveat because I have, I took 1 Canadian law course. That we have mentioned that we are exploring this subject with our city attorney. We have not activated our city attorney to look into how TDRs under Vermont law could be used in this creative way. So I think a next step will
Maybe
be
that's a
to,
great next step.
explore that for you.
Yeah.
He
Make sure
He
legal.
didn't leave the building when I said that we're looking at this, but I didn't specifically ask him to, look into this in depth yet, so I
Wait,
think we would
next step.
do that as a next step.
Okay, then next thing is our rare, threatened, endangered species discussion. And I'm super excited that we are working on a model for use in other communities. I think we've done this a few times in different areas and kind of neat to be ground zero.
Yeah, and this was a quick caveat on that. There is still some moving parts at the state level with all of this, so.
Oh, do you want me to take them out?
Well, so the state is still in legislative session. And so there are still some bits that are moving around that are primarily related to other parts of Act 181. So about the road rule and tier 3 and things you may have seen in the news, but some of the things related to some of this get not necessarily swallowed up, but like, for example, A&R proposed removing the word rare and keeping it as threatened and endangered because that more closely aligns with what they already have as regulations. The addition of the word rare is actually a move. It's more expansive in a certain way, so.
Threatened is more rare than rare.
Yes.
Okay.
Rare, threatened, endangered,
Okay.
or the other way. Lots of the rare, fewer of these, threatened, endangered.
Okay.
Fewer of those.
Oh, it's
And everything
yeah.
else.
And then everything else, then chickens.
That's us.
So there are still pieces that may move, like having the word rare taken out again. But we effectively took the model that we presented to you back in December as an option. There hasn't been a lot of movement on that from further conversations with A&R. We've just sort of added the language that makes it South Burlington specific and put it into the model language. The idea being that we're adopting it, it has to be South Burlington specific with our terms, our districts are, saying South Burlington, but it's pretty plug and play, or at least take it and then add small bits of nuance for other municipalities. There be at this time no requirement for any of that to happen. And there's so many other things that are going on with these topics, with the Act 250 tiers at the state level and with A&R and with the Land Use Review Board, that this is not the top of their agenda at the moment. But we'll see kind of how it shakes out. We are just putting it into this pile of, hoping to move it forward into the pile of amendments that would be warning, so that when we are able to apply for tier 1A, which has already been in concept approved, like to move forward for the municipality, that we are in a position where our LDRs match what we need to have to be able to do that application. We have no indication at this point that any of the moving parts and extensions of timelines and potentially getting rid of certain things, there may be names that change in the Act 250 structure, but I don't have an indication that the timeline for applying for tier 1A is moving out.
No, we expect the window to open this summer.
Is this sometime this summer? So putting this into the amendments that we're looking to warn in May is the intention of this meeting.
Right, and just to add to one point there in terms of the collaboration in developing this as a model was this was a collaboration working with other communities, but also working with the Agency of Natural Resources, both because they have a formal role in actually reviewing development applications, but they also have a formal role in providing comments to the Land Use Review Board about what is considered acceptable. And so this was trying to get ahead of that so that we collectively, not only on this subject, but on lots of subjects, have the state agencies being cheerleaders of the applications that they come in, not coming in and saying, well, they never talked to us and here's everything that's wrong with it, go back to the drawing board, South Burlington. So we're really trying, this represents having worked with their divisions who are experts in this subject on something that is both functional for them and in the spirit of the law.
Yeah, and something that is just one more
Not
piece
just
of,
spirit of law, implementing law.
yeah. One more thing that's just in the theory behind this is it's a little bit of a funny line to walk, where we are adding a regulation about species. We're deferring to A&R and everything else because we'd be taking on the Act 250 stuff, not taking on Act 250 on its own, but we're adding a regulation to take some of that place. But the intention is not to be recreating Act 250, it's to be covering some of the very basics that then are allowing development to happen, because this is, as a reminder, only in the tier 1A area, it's in the development area of the city. So you're not wanting to put something that is equivalent or even higher than Act 250 inadvertently, or advertently, and accidentally make it
Purposely.
more onerous in our development area than something that goes through Act 250.
Question. Undue disturbance, I suspect that is defined in Title 10 somewhere.
I believe so.
And the other thing that we should all know is that Title 10 covers the protection of the habitats themselves, not just the animals and plants, of course.
Yeah, so
This-
more than anything, this is a, it has the substance of the regulation, but it is really outlining the process of how and when we get ANR to do their professional job on our behalf at the municipal level that they normally would have been doing for Act 250. So normally the state, you'd have Act 250 review, they send it to ANR, ANR reviews it, they bring whatever concerns they have. This is our setting up an efficient but effective model, structure for getting that same expertise from ANR without swamping them with every application that comes through our door.
It's a lot of work for, talking to the Endangered Species Committee guy, there's only two.
Right, and I should say,
Two
there
factors.
there was another option under state law, which is that you can just exclude those areas geographically from your municipality, from being in tier 1, and then you don't have to have the rules at all. We did explore that, but in theory, that could change in terms of where an endangered species is found. And so let's say, 8 months from now, something is found in the middle of city center, we would be kicked out of being in tier 1A altogether. So we thought, let's be ahead of this, plan for it, be prepared, and if it never comes up, then great.
Go ahead, Colin.
One just clarification, so overall, yeah, this looks quite reasonable with the caveat, I'm not an environmental scientist, but I guess the only thing is, so having the threshold be 10 acres. I assume that is, it's aligning with the tier 1B status. Is that something that's pretty locked in, that it really does need to be 10 acres? I kind of ask because that threshold is going to be pretty significant
Yeah.
on what projects are going to be applying under this.
So that is aligned with the exemptions from Act 250. So if you are not in tier 1A,
Mhm.
you don't even get Act 250 review until 10 acres
Or 50 units, or,
50 units.
or 50 units.
so we're not paying this to units here, we're only gonna look at land here, okay.
We did contemplate in drafting this, whether it should be in acres and units, but the units is such a, I don't wanna call it arbitrary, but the scale can be so massively different. Right across the street next to Trader Joe's is 120 units on
The damage to the environment is more about acres essentially.
the land affected than the units
Affected,
on
land
it.
affected,
Right.
yeah.
Right, and so to sort of artificially change it based on the number of units isn't,
And
it didn't seem like that was science-based, whereas the number of acres is a more science-based number.
so if we went lower than 10 acres, we'd then be adding more burden that's currently on Act 250, but higher than 10 acres would effectively be less than Act 250 currently requires.
Yes.
Currently / let's say we never went for tier 1A, we would still be tier 1B,
Mhm.
and tier 1B has those,
Under 10
Thresholds.
acres, okay, fair.
right, it would be
We don't
10
want,
acres, 50 units, or commercial under 10 acres.
we don't want our tier 1A area that's supposed to be the most streamlined and development efficient, I guess,
Mhm.
to be a higher burden to go through than a tier 1, a community that hasn't gone through those hoops
Gotcha.
to establish tier 1A.
And if it was 15 acres, then it's arguably, the Lord might say that's too loose because.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
I think if you moved it in the other direction, let's say you made it 15 or 20 acres,
Mhm.
I would expect that the Land Use Review Board or the Agency of Natural Resources would say, why did you set it that high? The law says you're supposed to regulate this subject,
Yeah,
right? So
okay,
we're trying to thread this needle of what is the law? The law says you must regulate the subject. We feel really good having worked with them that the threshold represents consistency across different scales of regulation
okay,
and
cool.
therefore makes a good.
All right, cool, thanks, yeah, I'm convinced that
No,
10 is
please.
the right number here.
Glad you're asking the questions, 'cause it's your policy ultimately.
I have a question about the map. It says map X. Is that gonna be like, a live map, like using the ANR Atlas or something, or are we gonna?
I think it's just the tier 1A area. Is that the part you're
So
talking
it
about?
says, no, it's under B1, little b. And I think it's talking about known locations of significant natural communities and
Oh,
or
yeah.
RPEs.
I
Like,
think that
what
was
is
my-
that map gonna
I think
be?
that was my placeholder for their mapping.
Right, so it's gonna have to be their map, not our map.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be their
Their map.
map that gets updated however they update it, so.
Yeah.
So similar to, we don't
What
quote a
is-
specific floodplain, we
The
say the
floodplain- it's
flood,
the
you know,
FEMA
the floodplain.
Yeah, so that's just my placeholder
I just wanted to
from,
make sure, cause
not
that does
finding the
change,
title.
just cause we have two bats now, it doesn't mean we don't have a different species
right,
later.
you don't wanna have a static map that is adopted by South Burlington that, you know, things happen and it doesn't get updated for 25 years, but it finally, you know, they have found a different bird or a shrew, something,
It's just amongst the
Oh.
mammals.
or something.
It's just amongst the mammals. I don't know about, I didn't find out about insects and plants.
Yeah, I don't know if there are other ones.
Regardless, I trust the A&R
Probably.
field to be more intelligent than us.
A butterfly, but,
Yeah, anyway.
Donna?
Yeah, you're hitting on a question that I had because the Wheeler Park area, even when we had discussions about creating a conservation district there, you know, we found out that there had not been any survey, that was not even considered wetland at one point, you know, because it hadn't been surveyed ever. And, you know, it wasn't until our neighborhood, was very concerned about road being put through there, it's like, well, isn't this on the map?
I did that.
Well, there were a
Yeah,
couple
no,
of people
I-
doing
you
it,
know, I got
Stu Boyd
look at
came
it
in too.
because-
So I don't know if you worked with Stu, because, yeah, there was a lot of effort needed to get them to actually come in and look at that.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, so like how do you instigate? Or, you know, when a development is about to happen and they haven't looked at that maybe for 30 years, are they all of a sudden gonna have the resources to devote to it? Or is it possible that there just won't be an updated survey, and because they don't have the time to do it, it may get overlooked?
Well, the DRP
Yeah,
may
these-
require them to bring in an expert to tell them if there's any threatened or endangered.
Based on what?
So
Well,
it
sightings.
works a little different for these, so, so with like wetlands, you actually look on the ground and see if there's wetlands present.
And the
These-
type of plants apparently that
right.
are
So-
growing there, cause it may not be wet one time.
This is different. These are, either known occurrences, cause somebody stumbled across it and reported it.
It's like
Or,
iNaturalist.
yeah, kind of, or, there's ranges where vast portions of the state are designated for, you know, like these two bats that we have here, vast portions of the state kind of are known areas where these bats might live. And therefore, there's just like a big map that shows a lot of areas.
The developers never
The
expected to map.
yes, the developer is not expected to map it, and there isn't a person from A&R that comes and does a map. So it's just different.
It's
Yeah.
It's somewhat general then.
There's one more category to it that also makes it different, which is that regardless of local rules or state rules, it's the reference at the end. it is illegal to, under federal law, right? It's federal law?
Yeah.
To disturb a threatened or endangered species. That has nothing to do with the regulatory side, it is illegal. And so if a person willfully ignores a thing, there's an entire area of law that addresses that, and so there is a incentive to report the things that you happen to come across.
Yeah, well, that,
And also,
Things like.
willful's kind of the, you know, the important
Well,
word there
things-
because.
Professional
something-
licenses are on the line, you know,
Yeah.
arborists and engineers and, you know, surveyors and things. If it is found out, like those are things that are taken very seriously, is our understanding from A&R because of that personal outfall that can happen from being like, oh, I don't see that
Yeah.
bat.
So this is very different than, because you know about, well, water resources.
Yeah.
Streams and stuff like that, cause.
It's too, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I've done like 3 trainings on bats.
Oh.
Because it's really important because my
That a bit-
projects, maybe to like get down to my dam we're working on, you have to cut down 3 trees. And those trees might have a little brown bat who might wanna live there. So,
Wow.
you know, we have this like extensive permitting and time of year restrictions and, you know, things that we need to make sure of. So just last month this month we had this crazy flurry of like, oh no, we gotta cut these 3 trees over here and somebody's gotta cut these 3 trees over here because the bats are gonna come. We have to, you know, so there's kind of a whole protocol here and,
well,
I think
that's-
what this is doing is basically saying, this is the process that happens now at the Act 250 level. We're gonna make sure we have it happen at our local level because it's not happening at the state level anymore. So like, this seems good and it matches the current.
Okay, so
It
this
also-
is somewhat different then, because I was just really concerned that something could happen, like, well, I know of a farm where they wanted to build an additional pond. And A&R had to send somebody out to look at the vegetation to see if that was wetland. And it was a stream, but it wasn't a wetland. And without any documentation or any proof, they just said, no, you can't build it. And he had no recourse whatsoever.
This does not change anything about state permitting, other than Act 250. So this changes Act 250, but whatever state laws exist about stream alteration permits or all the many that Jessica navigates on a daily basis, this does not, nothing in Act 181 supersedes or overwrites any of that other than Act 250.
And it's just very different than wetlands, you know, because it's not an on the ground thing.
Yeah.
And what's important is that you also can't destroy or damage the habitat of an endangered species. Because, I mean, messing with the animals is one thing, but if you cut down the trees where they live, and they can't live there
Yeah,
anymore,
so
that's
there,
a big
it's,
deal.
it's true, Michael, there's different levels of it. So there's the hibernaculum trees, like if you know there's a tree where those bats actually do live in certain parts of their life cycle, you really can't be cutting them. And you really can't even be working near them during like the baby bat season. So that very, very important habitat, like for the bats, is like separately important than the trees that they might live in for just like a very little bit of time, but those trees might be interchangeable as long as the bats aren't in them in the moment. So it's kind of a complicated system, but this kind of refers back to the experts who would help navigate and kind of set those restrictions, so it feels like it does it.
No, it's fine. I only had one suggestion, which was to move item G, the last item, right to the top, because it's kind of key to the whole draft we've got here.
Does it set the stage for all of it?
If it's preferred by the commission, I can cut and paste. I don't think it changed any, I wouldn't wanna move it to somewhere in the middle, but like from the top or the bottom structurally doesn't make any difference.
No, it just occurred to me when I read through the whole thing, And then at the end, oh, this covers everything.
Right.
Okay.
Do people wanna move G to the top?
I don't even know which section you're talking about.
This is what-
G.
I don't have a.
I'm not a strong feeling.
Okay, so
Oh, okay,
in the
that's
interest
actually.
of moving along, I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna say I move to advance the raft of the significant natural communities and rare, threatened and endangered species.
Chapter 12, item.
With the addition of moving G to the top. Of, I guess it would probably be after A. To the upcoming round of amendments.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
And we are unanimous, which means we don't need the roll call, but just to be clear, Helen did vote yes from her online position.
Thank you very much.
Any other things on this?
Nope.
Nice job, thanks. We also have a discussion of our priorities, and good thing Duncan led us a robust discussion of this last time. So maybe this is
Bathroom break.
relatively close to something.
So this reflects the updates from the commission's discussion, so you all seem to be in a pretty.
Yeah, it looks like you added those under technical.
Yep,
Yep.
good for me.
I thought it looks good.
I wonder, do we need to adjust the one that talks about TDRs to reflect tonight's discussion of that, like flipping the. Cause this talks about heights only. And I
That's
think we
right,
like,
that was really the council request, so now that you've.
I would my recommendation would just be for, if you wanted to move this as your draft work plan to be presented to city council, I would say, consider changes in the use of TDRs. And then strike the rest of that phrase.
So just consider
Consider changes in the
use of
use
TDR
of TDRs.
and just leave it
And
at
then strike, cause even saying in city center,
Yeah.
we were talking about other things, so if you
Alright.
strike in city center for heights, then.
I like that, yeah.
Duncan, anything else that you can think of?
I know that Michael had some I don't know if we talked about the official map real quickly. In terms of that update.
Right, and that is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Michael's comments were about prioritizing the work within the work plan.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely your prerogative, but it's separate from what's the list.
Okay.
So step one is what's the list.
Where does that, is natural resources, or somebody working on tree standards of some kind? I know that this was something that started. And how
So
does that relate
this-
to the landscaping?
Good question. So this year, the council policy priorities included looking at public trees in the public right of way. And so that is being developed through the arborist and with consultation with the NRCC. We have communicated with the staff liaisons for Natural Resource Conservation Committee and Recreation and Parks, and also Department of Public Works on this proposed approach to landscaping. And that seemed at this time to jive with where the all the other committees have expressed their interest as well. What's gonna happen from here forward, I'm gonna set aside the planning commission for a second because you're a statutory body. All the committees, the policy committees of the city are by today submitting their proposed work plan items to council. Council is gonna look at these, receive these. Councilors are gonna give their feedback on things that they are interested in. The staff leadership team is going to, after hearing a little bit from council, give our recommendations. And then council's gonna have a meeting in June, a work session to go through all of this and decide what are their overall policy priorities. The commission's in a slightly different position because you are a statutory body and you have the authority to work on the items that you choose to prioritize. And our city charter says council may also assign things to you. So it is possible that through the work of this, council may, as they did with a couple of items this past year, make a addition to your work plan. We won't know that for the next little bit. But for now, this is our best understanding of where all those subject areas have landed, including the landscaping. Does that answer your question, Donna? I think that was a more
Most
thorough
part,
answer
for the
than I
most
was looking
part.
for.
I guess the one word I'm a little concerned about was maintenance. Are you talking maintenance in terms of landscaping? You talking about during the initial development
So for,
and maintenance until it's turned over to the owner, or?
So without going into a deep dive in the subject, one of the pieces of feedback that we've received from our arborist is that one way to help potentially, this is for you to have a more thorough discussion on, to have trees be thriving at the time that we take them over, is to allow a portion of a landscape budget to be assigned to take care of them in the intervening 3 or 4 or 5 years from when they're planted. Basically give them an incentive to have them be really healthy, not just not dying by the time we take them over. So just being creative about, it costs money to keep trees, to have trees really establish. And so how do we foster that, encourage that?
I noticed official map updates is listed twice. Is there a reason for that? On page 2.
We were really excited about it last month.
Yeah.
You really wanted it, Michael, you're gonna get it twice.
Second one.
Huh?
Under the first one.
The first one, a few lines below.
You know how on ours, like the second columns are on another page, so you can't tell how they line up.
Oh, that's the same one. It's just on the next page.
Oh.
It's a table that it was created in Excel by our data manager it's a standardized table. And the best way for me to make it a visible size of font was that this is 2 columns, and then on the next page, that's the next 2 columns. So when you're seeing official map updates in the second column on the second page, that's in the same row as the official map on the first page.
And it comes twice because those are categories.
Oh, I think it's maybe because is Mary
Yeah.
Street
Because
the
it's 2
second?
separate categories, yeah.
I don't know.
I see Mary Street counts as official album updates.
Is it official map update and then I think it might mean that Mary Street might need an official map update.
Yes.
That one's associated with Mary Street.
Okay. And
So
other
the-
one's general, the rest of the city.
So
Yeah,
there's
so
2
that column, the PPNS priority name, that's what the shorthand version of what was in the current PPNS that they chose. So those are both 2 work items for this coming fiscal year that are related to that same bigger project of updating the official map.
Yeah.
It's not the best way to see it, but
So.
Oh, yeah, so, right, because Mary Street is its own discrete project that might have an official map
yes,
update with it, so we didn't want to ignore that that's part of that precise
Right.
engineering project.
And you may have covered this at the last meeting, but just to be clear, we often have a series of UPWP projects that are like in process and then ones that might be coming up. Are all the ones that are in process on here? The ones that we have a role in?
Well,
Yeah, so Mary Street is an example
That's
of
one
that
of 'em.
exact one there. And Shelburne Road will be next year's one,
yeah,
so.
future
yes.
Shelburne Road
Okay.
Center planning.
So they're-
And if they're not in there, planning commission's role is 1 meeting or less. And so
Yeah,
we didn't
okay.
tag out
Yeah,
every
no, and that's
single
fine.
item
You
that
know,
you
like,
might
we've got
intervene
a-
with.
sidewalk project, that's
Right.
not.
A
we
lot
don't
of our
need
work
those.
this year was UPWP projects that we're currently doing are we had the little robot go around and do a sidewalk inventory of condition throughout the city, and it's prioritizing that, so it's a very important but largely administrative task that, you know, will probably be shared with the bike ped committee, but it's really, you know, which of all these intersections need to be upgraded first, that kind of work.
Let's see. Our actions. I mean, we have on the agenda that we could move to approve this if people are feeling good about it.
Move to approve.
Second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, is that a good enough motion? Do we need the official language?
We will assume that it is moved with the change that you talked about with regards to TDRs.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous, so we don't need to do the roll call. We also have under other business, the UVM presentation.
Yep.
So that people had that.
Yep, so that was just what was
Please.
presented by UVM at the previous meeting. It was provided to me and I provided it to Jessica. She asked for it and I said, hey, I should probably put it in for everybody, so might as well put it in the official packet instead of just emailing.
Yeah.
So no action or nothing required, just for your information. That's the presentation from last meeting.
Which is always interesting.
That was good.
Yeah, no, it was interesting.
Yeah, that would have been a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then any other business?
No.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. Great meeting.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Good discussion. I know, I
You
can't
wanna take it?
keep us on track
Thank you,
like
Ellen.
Duncan does.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Ellen.
Bye-bye. I can't get out of it.
Recording stopped.
It's been a horrible day to have this